Welcome back to BlockIQ. I want to touch on some rather interesting developments happening within the real world assets tokenization space. There's a few rather interesting real world asset coin projects which I think you need to be made aware about. Also going to be touching on some recent developments from the Trump administration, and lastly a brand new consensus mechanism happening within the blockchain space. So let's touch on the details next. So here's the interesting article that I've come across which touches on some rather interesting additional real world assets tokenization coin projects. So for the first one, it's to do with Inks1, which is a US regulated trading platform that looks into tokenizing the real estate and the tokenized securities on the blockchain. Now, if you recall in some of my earlier videos, Ondo Finance is the current leader in this space, but is really expected to see some other additional fintech players are going to be taking on some of that market share, even for the same type of tokenized assets. So this is healthy competition, and it can only be good news for us investors. In the Inks1 platform, users can trade tokenized shares of the Magnificent Seven companies like Google, Tesla, Microsoft, Nvidia, which is backed on a 1-on-1 ratio with their underlying assets. It even broadens the net to one of the renowned ETFs like the S&P 500 ETF and the BlackRock iShares Treasury ETF. Very, very interesting. The second of the three that I want to bring to your attention is tokenizing notarized real estate on the blockchain, which is actually integrated with the land registries. Now, this makes total sense because I've touched, again, various episodes on Mantra, which is one of the first fintech player responsible for tokenizing the Dubai Realtors set of premium real estate in the region on the blockchain. Well, obviously the logical next step is to think about tokenizing the notarial services. So when people actually purchase these premium real estate properties, they need to think about how to take that next step further and actually arrange deed titles around the ownership of these physical analog assets on the blockchain. So it makes sense to actually go ahead and tokenize these notarial services in the real estate industry. That's just another logical next step, evolution, tokenizing real estate 2.0 on the blockchain. And lastly, which I find the most interesting out of the three, is tokenizing specific physical assets such as GPUs, IoT devices and Wi-Fi hotspots on what they call here the decentralized physical infrastructure network assets, DPIN for short, which says that it purports to slash costs for AI developers by crowdsourcing compute and locking liquidity for asset owners, and indeed expanding the blockchain's reach into real world infrastructure, physical infrastructure. Now, this is actually very, very interesting because we all know that the GPU chips are responsible for training AI models. So you might have heard renowned players like Nvidia and some other players out there. So this actually, again, makes sense that the blockchain is broadening the net to actually have this crowdsourced compute network function within the blockchain. It's not just the physical analog assets that you and I can touch and play in our day-to-day lives, like real estate, tokenized treasuries, shares, and so on. But in addition to that, they're going into the physical infrastructure realm, which again is rather an interesting development. And all of these coin projects, it really all mounts up to the major trend that we are seeing, that this 2034 infamous estimate provided by the major consultancy firms like Boston Consulting Group and all the rest of it, they are estimating a whopping $30 trillion industry by 2034-35 period. The actual industry behind real world assets is definitely buoyant, and it's definitely worth considering from an investment standpoint to do your research in this space, because this is growing. I have made an explanation on the early videos that anything that you can think of, any physical asset that you can touch and feel in our day-to-day lives that have that economic value attached, that in itself is a perfect candidate to be tokenized on the blockchain. So, like I said, the list of these candidates is growing, and we are seeing through the news like these additional coin projects that are unfolding and coming into the mainstream. So, really interesting times. And the second article which is really eye-opening, which is news from the Trump administration, where he wants the USAID on the blockchain. So this USAID is the agency responsible, as it says here, for international development. Now, ever since Trump has come back in office, he always pledged that he's pro-business, pro-crypto, and wants to establish US as a crypto capital in the world, including Bitcoin, right? So he is certainly living up to those promises, and he's already enacted a handful of executive orders on that effect. And this other one around USAID is a rather interesting one, because if you recall in the news from Elon Musk, which he, as you know, he's part of this DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, where he has the mandate to actually strike out those inefficiencies in terms of exorbitant funds that's been wasted across the federal government. So as part of that effort, they found a huge black hole in the US aid, where there's been billions upon billions worth of malinvestments, mostly, according to Trump, is triggered by fraud and corruption in the preceding federal government. So what he's trying to do with this makes sense, in that he wants to kind of open up the US aid onto the blockchain, which, as we all know, is decentralized, and there's no cheating and frauding it because it's completely open, out in the open, in the public decentralized blockchain. And it goes on to say that it radically increases security, transparency, and traceability of those development aids and funds for international purposes and development, because he wants to eradicate as much of the corruption and malinvestment and influence over the issuance of these international development aids around the world from a US standpoint. So this is, again, very, very interesting. And it just comes to show that Trump means business. And given that this is going to be his second and final term at office, what he's trying to do in order to achieve that legacy is to open up the US aid to become that more open, transparent, equitable for all, in terms of the donors and the recipients of those aided funds. So again, this makes total sense to me. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this develops in the weeks and months throughout his last term at office, his 4 or 5 year term at office. So just watch this space. And the latest development that I will leave you today's episode is around a brand new consensus mechanism that's been developed by this blockchain fintech player called D-Wave Quantum Inc., the New York Stock Exchange base. You've got the ticker symbol there. Now, they are a leader in quantum computing systems, software and services, and they made an announcement that they've actually introduced and published a new research paper around introducing a novel blockchain architecture that uses techniques from its quantum supremacy demonstration by adding quantum to traditional blockchain computation in order to enhance its blockchain security and efficiency. They're denominating this as blockchain with proof of quantum work. So you might have heard proof of work, which is about adding computational power and electricity through a broad network of participating nodes. But in addition to that, they're going to add additional security by adding this proof of quantum work into this new paradigm shift in the proof of work. This is very interesting because you might have heard of news about the Google chip. I can't remember the name of the chip. They claim that they have a handful of qubits that could actually threaten the security of the Bitcoin network. That's been dumbfounded by the Bitcoin developing community, where they said that they have thousands upon thousands qubits that would mitigate that Google quantum chip, which only handles a handful, not even 10 qubits. Well, according to the Bitcoin developer communities, it's in the thousands. So as of today, Bitcoin network is not under threat under quantum computing. But having said that, this is an interesting development, because if this brand new blockchain proof of quantum work consensus mechanisms were to be developed, which I suspect it will at some point, then obviously the likes of the Bitcoin network, they will need to add this as an upgrade feature over and above their current proof of work consensus mechanism to give that additional comfort, security, and resilience into the Bitcoin network in order to safeguard the multi-trillion-dollar market cap that it currently enjoys at the moment, and is set to grow quite significantly in the coming months and years as we go through this journey. And again, this will be something that we need to pay an extra close pair of eyes on, because this is going to have a major hard fork shift on the rest of the public blockchains out there, whether it's Bitcoin or other leading blockchain coin projects. So this will be very interesting to see how this actually transcends and come into fruition, which I suspect it will at some point. I don't know when, but certainly will happen, because there is going to be this threat of quantum computing happening within the blockchain space. It's always a question of time. And what they're trying to do in parallel to that threat, this quantum computing threat, is to come up with some innovative mitigating ways to address that threat, which I suspect will be covered by this blockchain with proof of quantum work consensus mechanism. So that's all I want to discuss in today's episode. If you haven't done so already, to like and share this video to like-minded individuals, friends and colleagues at work. And if you haven't done so already, to please subscribe to my channel, as I regularly publish some interesting videos such as these, anything to do with Bitcoin, blockchain technology and the future of finance. So until next time.